And especially like during COVID, right? To just illustrate the importance of what you're talking about. When you say they're coming to take what what this is, I mean, what you're talking about them taking is your freedom. That's because that's if there's anything that's been taken away during COVID, it was the actual concept of freedom. That's what
Yes.
they took away because they have officially laid down a marker in the sand that says if this happens, you lose your freedom, and we get to tell you how much freedom you have. And luckily we haven't gone Australia, but the the flag has been laid, and people are okay with it.
And a good example of that is our own state, right? Where I
Yeah.
think the last number I had track of was that there were 13 challenges to Jay Inslee's executive power during COVID.
Yeah.
And the state Supreme Court had ruled in Jay Inslee's favor all 13 times.
All 13.
Yep.
So even though we are not at Australia yet, right? Our state has already set the precedent, like you said, of this is fine. He's allowed to do this if this is happening.
Yep.
And if they've already ruled it once, the precedent has now been set. And if it happens again, the legal precedent is already there.
Yep.
And
They've already killed freedom.
It doesn't matter if it's 100 years from now, 200 years from now. We are still using precedent from 1865 if it's still the standing precedent, right? Nothing has changed since then. That's still the precedent that we're using because it's been tried and true over and over and over again from case after case after case.
Precedent, baby.
So if it, even like I said, even if it doesn't happen from 100 years from now,
Yep.
the last time we had a vaccine mandate, right, would have been during polio, and people were given the option of a fine.
Yep.
That's like just now starting to become a discussion. Until then, it was completely ignored because, like you said, Larry, and like you said, Colin, is to take more. The last time you had the option of a fine. This time you do not. There is no fine option this time. You either get the vaccine or you don't go out to eat. You get the vaccine or you don't get to do whatever you want. You get the vaccine or your freedoms are limited, right? And we've seen it in Germany, even outside of Australia. In Germany, if you're unvaccinated, you get to do nothing now. If you're in France, you get to do nothing now if you're unvaccinated. I saw a video just yesterday, maybe even this morning, of people eating in a restaurant in France while they're walking around. The police officers are walking around taking people's papers, re-scanning people's papers who are actively eating food in a restaurant. It's not even for entrance anymore. It is to maintain your existence in somewhere where you've already been checked. You now must show your papers again to prove that we didn't fuck up the first time.
And to make matters worse, there are, I mean, if you spend any time on the internet, you'll see them. There are massive, massive protests happening in every one of these places, and nobody's covering it.
No, and
Nobody.
in Italy,
there's no
changing the
stomach
videos.
to have that conversation because they know they can't win that one.
No, in
You
Italy
can't
they
show
were.
that. Everybody wants freedom.
In Italy, they were changing the videos from the live feeds on the streets. So if you were on the street, you could see that there were mass protests there. But on the cameras on the government websites, it was just an empty street.
Yep.
It's just cars there, just parked cars,
Yeah.
just nothing. They're literally changing the information on the internet so that you cannot see it.
And can I just, one kind of witty thing here. Can these people just stop doing this? Because the goddamn globalist corporate elite fucking, commentator, fucking conspiracy dudes, whatever they're labeled as, like those guys, you're not helping your case.
Yep.
When you are systematically shutting, you're not shutting these protests, these mass protests down, because literally it would take an army to do that. There's tens of thousands of people out here. And by just, there was a point I was going to make and I lost it. But by choosing not to cover that, you're already planting your flag into saying, like, this is not okay.
Right.
No, you don't get to fight for your freedom. I'm sorry, there's none of that. There's none of this stuff going on. They're silencing that message. Even though they're not actively resisting, that's what it was. Even though they're not pushing back with the armies, they're still silencing it. They're saying, no, you guys don't get to know that exists. Which is, again, like we haven't, in America, even in the bluest of blue, the hardcore, even in California, right? You still have, in the grand scheme of freedom, like you could still live your life the way you want to, probably pretty effectually, right?
To a certain extent.
You're not going to feel like your freedom is lost, but that's not what is actually important here. What is important is that the concept of actual freedom is what they destroyed. And they've already proven that they could do it.
Yeah, and I think, again, I think not just their concept of freedom, I think that they've made it normalized that we're asked, like that we feel good to get back to like what's not even normal. Like people are gonna feel good when we go, and they're gonna be like, "Hey, we did it, right?" Knowing in the back of their mind like they can now control us, right? That's the problem with the vaccine, in my opinion, is the bodily. It's bodily sovereignty, right? And it's where I've always struggled. It's why I was ultimately pro-choice, right? And
My
it's
body,
why,
my choice.
100%. It's why I've always agreed pro-choice, right?
Yeah.
And on that, I think it's why, honestly, I've circled back to become pro-life, which is just crazy. But like the bodily sovereignty was something that mattered, right? Like to lay your moral judgments on me, like that's on you, but it's on me. So like it's not for you, it's my body, right? And now we are gonna get it back in theory, right? In March, like the vaccine, like when the mask first started, there were so many people that were mad. And then it just got extended to March and no one said anything, right? So when they give it back to us, we're going to feel like we're going to feel good. We're going to feel like we've been rewarded when in reality, we just got used to being tied down.
Yes.
Yeah.
A really good example of that, Jay Inslee, our Lord Inslee, right, our governor, just had a press conference
Lord Emperor
yesterday that I watched, and he had a question about lockdowns, right? The Omicron variant is popping off now, so people are getting scared. The CDC has officially told us that it's a concern, so everyone can officially be concerned now because
So all
the
the
CDC
institutions
has told
are
us.
telling you to be afraid.
Everyone be afraid. The CDC literally said it's officially concerned. So
The only person that didn't is
Be
the doctor
concerned
that
now.
discovered it.
yeah, the doctor who just it's a really good point, Colin. It's so weird that you say
Sorry.
that. The doctor who actually discovered the Omicron variant is like, actually, it's not that big of a deal. It seems to be maybe even less of a deal than the Delta variant, except for
then-
the fact that it doesn't give a fuck if you're vaccinated.
Yep. And then again,
Potentially, for YouTube's sake,
Yeah.
potentially, because we don't know that for certain.
potentially. That's all right. We're not that big. We could talk. We could say whatever we want.
Anyway, Lord Inslee, right, yesterday, he got a question about lockdowns. Are we going to go back into lockdowns? Like, is that something that you're looking at? And he says, I don't even know why you're saying that. We don't have lockdowns. Restaurants are open. People can go to restaurants. We're just telling people they should get vaccinated. So you're saying that things were never locked down, that there was never a point in time in this state in which you couldn't go and sit down in a restaurant. Is that what you're saying? Because that's not true. That is a lie. There were, in fact, several weeks, possibly even months, in which I could not go to the restaurants that I wanted and sit down and have a meal. If I wanted to get food there, I had to order it and sit in my car and wait for them to bring it out to me.
Yep.
That's
So
real.
That happened. That is a real thing that happened. There were actual points in time in this state where people were not allowed to go to work. They were told they needed to stay home because they were not essential personnel.
Unless
Colin
you were
was
one of
told
the
for
chosen.
48 hours that he wasn't essential personnel. He couldn't go to work. There was real question whether or not we were essential personnel. We make splints for infants. I make devices, medical devices that change the life. And I'm not self-aggrandizing. This is the literal. I've made splints for children who are 2-3 days old.
Yep.
You're telling me that that's not an essential service? There was literal question about that, right? There were people who were here, like I said, bartenders and shit, who couldn't work. One of the guys in our fantasy league didn't work for an entire year because he worked in a bar. The bar was closed, wasn't allowed to be open, couldn't go to the bar. You're going to tell me lockdowns didn't exist?
Yeah.
Thank you, right? And the fact that you got to label someone like essential or
Non-essential?
like,
Yeah.
What?
like when you're bringing home money, and this is my big problem, right? And this gets me juiced up, right? When you're the income for your family and they're relying on you and you're not working and getting paid because you're not non-essential, that job feels pretty fucking essential. And that's why it doesn't fucking work, right? Because like even if you're just a goddamn janitor, right, making your $15 an hour in Washington, well, fuck, like that's an essential part of my goddamn day. And what happened? And this is again, I'll say it all the time. This is the apathy because what happened?
Yes.
They took it away. What did they give us? They gave us our little fucking little Snicker treats, right? It came down, and then everybody was literally sucking to the tea, right? And even if you wanted to go back, if you want to make yourself, sometimes they would tell you no, and that's insane. And that's again another reason I can't go back to Washington because I see what it can be and how comfortable everybody was like that. People
They were
down
fine
here,
with it.
like,
I'm really hoping we don't turn into California because
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat everything.